What if you moved into a new house and you begin hearing strange noises every night? You reach out to your neighbor who tries to help you, but soon, even they are doubting your stories. How can you prove what is happening to you is real when you yourself are starting to doubt your own sanity? In this episode, we're going to take a look at the 2024 film, The Intruder. I'm Nikki, and this is Coffee and Shadows. Michael is in his early 30s, and he moves into his parents' house after the renter has moved out. That night, he hears faint noises coming from inside the house towards the front of the house. He listens for a little bit, then he doesn't hear anything, so he decides to go ahead and lay back down. As soon as he does that, the noise happens again, but this time it's a little bit louder. So Michael goes to check. And when Michael goes to check, the camera's actually facing him, and his face looks like he's actually sleepwalking. His eyes are open, they're kind of half closed as well, and his face looks blank, like there's nothing going on. We are kind of under the impression that he might be sleepwalking, and this actually comes up later in the movie. He gets into the living room and he confronts the intruder. He ends up passing out. The next morning, he's awakened by a knock on the door. Michael finds himself on the living room floor. When he goes to answer the door, it's a neighbor that lives two houses down from him named Joe. And Joe was friends with the renter that used to live in Michael's house. And Joe was a little bit, I don't know, he kind of barges himself into the house. He says, I just wanted to see what was done with the place, like it's any of his business. But he barges himself in and he explains to Michael that him and the renter, and I think the renter's name is Nancy, Joe, his wife, and Nancy were friends, and every 2 or 3 weeks, they would go to each other's houses to have dinner. So he invites Joe to have dinner with, or he invites Michael to have dinner with Joe and his wife, and Michael accepts. That night at dinner, Michael tells Joe and his wife what happened the night before, and Joe says there were a rash of Berkeley. I don't know when really a rash, but they did have Berkeleys within the neighborhood, but that was like 3 or 4 years ago. And since then, the neighborhood has been pretty safe, but you can't really trust people. So Joe recommends that Michael get security cameras. So after getting home from the dinner, Michael goes and checks all the locks on the doors, and then he goes to bed. Again, the same thing happens. He hears noise in the house, but this time Michael stays in his room. And then later that night, later the next day, it's a repeat. Michael tells Joe what happened, and then Joe starts really insisting that he get security cameras in the house and he should get a sleep monitor, because Joe asked Michael, does he have a tendency to sleepwalk, which Michael says he's not sure. He's never been told he hasn't. So Joe says, well, you should get a sleep monitor to kind of track your sleeping habits. That night, Michael downloads the app and he puts it on his nightstand and he lays down. The problem with this is you can't monitor anything on your phone, on any app, unless you have either a smartwatch or something on your wrist to monitor or have the app monitor what's going on. So that was one of the biggest goofs in the movie. There are a lot of other stuff, but that was one of the big ones I noticed. So that night, again, the same thing happens. Michael hears noise coming from the front of the house, but instead of going to see what's going on, Michael decides to just stay in his room and stay in the bed. And soon we see the intruder walking down the hallway towards Michael's room, and then he is standing above Michael, but he doesn't do or say anything, and Michael pretends that he's asleep. The next morning, he wakes up, he checks the sleep monitor app, and he notices that it picked up 2 sounds in the house. One lasted 1 minute and 14 seconds, and the second one lasted 14 seconds. He also finds one of the doors unlocked. And again, he's telling Joe what happened, but Michael does have the locks changed, and he gets the security cameras and he gets other security things to try to mostly to find out what's going on. And he places the couple of security cameras around the house, and he places a couple of cameras within the house. And then the next night, same thing starts to happen, but now Michael's going to start taking actions against it. But what Michael starts running into is a problem with Joe kind of trusting what Michael is saying, because Michael cannot prove anything. And so Joe is starting to have his doubts about Michael and if the things that Michael are saying are actually true. This is going to cause a conflict with Joe and Michael, and it's also going to cause kind of an inner conflict with Michael and himself, because as these things happen and the more he tries to explain to Joe what's going on and the less that Joe believes him, the more that Joe doesn't believe him, the more Michael is also questioning himself, like, did this really happen? And each time something happens at Michael's house where he is able to catch whomever is there, if anybody is there, something happens with the cameras or something happens with the sound. Just something goes wrong where Michael can't capture anything. So as I mentioned, this becomes a really big problem between Joe and Michael. And the movie just kind of goes that way. Michael is trying to prove that there is actually somebody coming into his house. And he's also trying to prove to Joe that, yes, what's happening to Michael is actually happening. But then, because of how the movie goes, it makes us question what's going on. They did somewhat of a good job of misdirection. I feel there were enough characters in the movie to create a really good diversion from everybody to really confuse us, the viewer, and they missed that opportunity. And where they really missed the opportunity is the ending when the big reveal came as to what was going on. I didn't like it. It actually killed the movie for me. I was really enthralled in the movie. I was invested in it. I wanted to try to figure out what was going on. Was this really happening? Was Michael sleepwalking? Was Joe involved? Was Joe's wife involved? It was just a lot of who's involved, what's really happening, going on until it reached the end, and then the reveal happened. I absolutely hated the reveal. There is so much they could have done with that reveal and continued with that reveal to really end the movie with a bang. So that's it. That's my take on the movie. It is called The Intruder, 2024. It stars David Gow, Gaw, I believe that's how you say his name. And it is from Dreamworks Pictures Entertainment. The director is Jack Brame, and it runs an hour and 41 minutes. I appreciate everyone stopping by, and as I always like to say, have a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. It all depends on where you are. Ciao.